take my hair wrap off.
Oh, you fine. Look, I had to put mine back in a ponytail. I was like, let me get this together this morning. Okay. So I'm gonna start leading the conversation.
Okay. Have you recorded? You started recording?
Yes, I pressed record.
Okay, awesome. Well, first of all, it was a great video. Despite the audio issues that I had, being able to hear some things, it was a very strong. It was the strongest video that I've seen for week one. So that's a positive thing, but that also kind of worries me because as we continue on our journey for the next 11 weeks, that means you have to get better. So usually, I rarely see threes given out the first week. So you should definitely be proud of yourself that you received, I believe, 2.
Well, I'm not. So it's okay.
Why? Let's talk about it.
Well, the 2 things that I noticed was I noticed you have more scaffolding questions for understanding learning. And I guess I didn't interpret it the way that you interpreted it.
Okay.
So I felt like it was more of my knowledge about with them being ready to move from what we were doing. So I was assuming that I should have been able to gauge at the conclusion of the lesson if they were ready to go to the next piece of a lesson or stay on that same concept another day. Not as I'm doing the lesson, having that marker to move to the next section, because they may make a connection when we speak of something next versus in that moment. So what I did was I was using their the formative assessment of the table that they had to create before I discussed it, and then taking that table and being able to correlate it into a graph. So that's what I was using to answer the understanding of learning, that I understood that they're ready to be moved to that next step.
Got you.
So I'm sorry, go ahead.
The trickiness in that, and I can completely understand where that assumption came from. The trickiness is the wording in the rubric.
Okay.
That kind of puts you on that 2 to 3 line, right?
Okay.
So when I was talking about where you hit the basic is where that student discourse piece. There were a lot of times when you called on one student or so to kind of give your response instead of checking in with all of the students. If you would have done more checking in with all of the students, I feel like that would have definitely pushed you to that 3. So there are moments where you did do a check for understanding, or you did ask a question, and whether you got the right answer or not, it's about assessing all of the kids and understanding if they're all ready to learn. And with your particular setup, you actually have probably like the most ideal setup, because you had about 6 to 9 students. It was less than 10. So you really could have taken that time to gauge every single student and where they were as far as their understanding to learn. And you did hit on a lot of instructional theories, but the one that would have pushed you to that 3 was the one I put in the evaluation about collaborative learning, them learning from each other. There was an area in your video where the student gave like a partial answer. I couldn't hear it as well, but I remember the question being about, I guess, the definition of linear, and it was if it passes through 0, and there was something else that he was supposed to give you. Instead of being teacher-led, right, and giving that response, how different would have it been if you would have asked every single student to engage in that conversation and have them have that conversation back and forth and arriving to that on their own. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. That makes sense.
Okay.
So,
and go ahead.
Okay. So, are we talking about the understanding of learning or the readiness for learning piece?
Both. So honestly, everywhere where you got a 2, if you would have pushed more student discourse, that would have pushed them up to a 3. They were all kind of connected.
Okay.
So I know that some of the verbiage sounds very redundant, right? So understanding learning, there's a part in the rubric, and I bolded it out in your evaluation. It's a disciplined thinking processes to promote student learning.
Right.
Again, that's that student discourse, right? Do I have something embedded in my lesson plan that allows them to talk about their learning and work through their learning with each other, not as the teacher engaging, but as them working with each other? That would be understanding of learning. And then in the readiness for learning, if again, that checking in with them, or that verbal check-in, or allowing them to kind of talk about how they arrived to an answer or how they thought about the answer, would have told you, okay, this group is ready to do the graph piece, or hold up, I need to back up and address these misconceptions. So they're kind of weaved in together, where the answer, I guess, for both of them would have been that student discourse piece that would have moved you to a 3.
Okay.
What are your thoughts?
Well, no, because for the understanding of learning piece, candidate has limited knowledge of how learning occurs. That to me is about me. It's not about the students having the discourse. And that limits his or her development of instructional strategies to promote student learning. That's what a 2 is to what it says a 2 is for that. That's my limited knowledge, not the students not being able to communicate with one another. And then the readiness for learning is candidate recognizes students' readiness for learning, but isn't sure of how to help the individual students move to a higher level before the other students in the class are ready to do so.
So I gauge the readiness piece. If you don't know where everybody is in their learning process, how are you ready to move forward?
Okay. Well,
so
and I guess that's what makes that's where I guess my style is different, is because I look at it as I need to finish my lesson, because sometimes you'll make a connection if I let you think it through, or you take a minute to let what I've said process. So I guess that's where I do it differently, and I can understand if that's going to give me a 2. It's always going to give me a 2, because I may check, and granted, this class was it's ideal, and that's why I did it this way, is because it is a small group. I usually have no more than 8 kids in this group, and I can ask each one of them, but I know certain kids are just not going to answer. They're just going to look at me.
Well, so the way to go about that, it doesn't have to always be a verbal question. It could be a reflection question. It could have been, when you ask a student that question about, and I just keep going back to that example because that's the example that I remember the most.
Passing through the origin 0, 0.
So when you ask that question and he gave his response, it could have been a simple, can everybody write down what you think the answer is going to be? So it doesn't always have to be, student discourse isn't always having to physically hear verbal conversation. It could be them kind of stopping and jotting, and they could have switched papers, and then they could read each other's thinking. Does that make sense?
Okay.
It doesn't, so I don't want you to be defeated or feel like I'm always going to get a 2 because my style is different. No ma'am. That's not true. Because again, you are stronger than other candidates that I've seen before. That's number 1. So I want you to understand that. Okay. I also need you to understand that the rubric, and this is probably what Glenda was kind of talking about our first video, the rubric is very strategically worded, where sometimes it is about the teacher and what the teacher's actions are, but then sometimes it's really about the student and what the student's actions are.
Okay.
So I don't want you to feel defeated as if like, well, I'm not going to, move up the ranks. You will. What I want you to focus on is on understanding the learning. Candidate has limited knowledge of how learning occurs, and that limits his or her development of instructional strategies to promote learning. Where it fell for a 2 for me is not that first part, because you don't have limited knowledge. You have a very strong knowledge. But it is, as far as the development instructional strategies, if they would have had more of a collaborative learning experience, then that would have moved then that part right there would have moved to the 3. That's what I want you to understand. So when you're looking at the full rubric, it's not just what's emboldened in the rubric, and it's not just the first part, it's the entire thing. So though you had a strong knowledge of how students learn, how are you using all of those theories to push all of the students, not just some, but all of them? That's where it fell into the 2 for the understanding student learning. And then again, because that's kind of connected to the readiness for learning, you were ready as far as what you had, for them to do. But how did you check with all 9 or 10 of them to make sure they were all ready to move to the next part?
Okay.
But that's what that readiness for learning is.
Okay. Got you. Okay. That makes sense.
Okay. Can I talk about your awesomeness though? Can I talk about the places?
Oh yeah, you're fine. Look, my mind is, because I'm actually working on number 2 now.
Okay.
So I'm making my video. So I think that's also important to know what to leave and what to take out, because it might have been something that I edited out that could have supported that and didn't realize it till now. But I just realized, I need to go back and redo my last video because I edited out some stuff that I may need to keep.
Okay, well, we can definitely talk about, we're going to talk about video 2 a little bit as well, and make sure that you understand the rubric for video 2 so that we can talk about those pointers. But you did a fantastic job as far as grouping your students. I love the idea of you giving each group a different sticky note color to kind of focus their learning. That I felt like was definitely thoughtfully planned out and definitely data-based. In your reflection, you had a lot of information about your students, your background of your students, because you looped with them, right?
Yes.
So you were able to group them accordingly for that. And that kind of go hand in hand with the meeting the student needs. Because you knew some of your students and their weaknesses or their challenges, you were able to support them, whether they needed more verbal help or comprehension help. The thing probably would have moved you to the 4 for meeting student needs goes back to that student discourse piece or that collaborative learning environment. With them being in their groups, you did and I call it the intentional but not intentional move of a teacher, where you walk away. You're like, I'm going to go write something on this board, right? Trusting them that they're going to
stay on task,
right?
Yep.
And I love that. I love that intentional but not intentional move. However, to move you to that 4 category, if you would have had like a rubric or a self-pacing guide, and it could be something very general, like when I'm in a group, am I doing this or am I doing that, to make sure that everybody is on task and engaged. And that would, I think that would have really kind of supported that social and emotional piece for your EL students as well as your other students. Because sometimes in a group, and I want to say they were grouped of like 3 or 4. Sometimes you're going to have that person that's going to kick back and watch everybody else do the work. So how are you making sure that that person is still doing what they're supposed to do and that they're engaged? So just having, I guess, like a self-pacing guide or something on, taped to the table to kind of remind them of these pointers and things that they need to do, I think would have supported that social and emotional piece as well.
Okay.
What are your thoughts on that?
I agree. I usually tend not to take things to the desk because they end up being destroyed, and I feel like it's a waste of time and energy. Yeah. But I believe it being somewhere posted in the classroom would probably be a best practice. But a self-pacing guide, I do agree. A lot of times I do have to redirect. It's the kids I have to redirect, I know it. So generally when I'm not looking at them, or they don't think I'm looking at them, I'm still paying attention to them.
Right.
Because it's just, fortunately, it's just so few because I have built that relationship, the group that you see me with. Most of my students are like them. Like, I don't have a lot of behavior issues out of my students this year. This year is kind of like a sweet year. I have very few behavior issues, and the ones that I do have a behavior issue with, I had them last year, and I had the same behavior issues. But I'm very fortunate this year to where that's not a major concern. I think a lot of them have started tasting success in math. Yeah. So they want to do it. It's less of me having to push them. It's more of me being supportive at this point. Gotcha. But I think last year had to play out for the benefit of this year to come. Gotcha. Because they're seeing growth now. So we just had our MOI. And I'm like, wow, look, you've been 2 years. So my student that I have there, Ingrid, she is one of my best students. She's one of my lowest. And I believe at the beginning of the year, she tested on first grade. Gotcha. Possibly second. So when she had 2 years worth of growth, I'm like, that puts you on this grade level. So she's all excited now. So it's a struggle and it's hard for her. And I said, even if you get a low grade, as long as you're moving in the right direction with understanding, take that and don't worry about the overall grade yet. You'll get there. So she keeps, because I don't want her to discontinue her perseverance because she doesn't see grades equaling what she wants. Gotcha. And so that's definitely an issue because she is so low and she is a SPED student. So that was one of the reasons why I wanted her in the group, because me creating that collaboration was intentional because I have high performers in that group, right, who she connects with and she's friends with and socializes with, so they can engage her and get her to move to another level. So this week's video coming up, I actually did some sit down and I sat intentionally next to her to give her guidance and support with one-on-one as everybody else was still working. So that part is in there because I know it was part of the learning differences. So I put that piece in there, and I didn't realize I did it intentionally until I watched the video. But yeah, it's just, I like the blend that I have. So I can see, I always feel like I need growth. So I don't never not take constructive criticism, but yeah, I still want to see some 4. So I'm the type of person like, well, what am I missing to get to a 4? But I realize we do have, like you said, we have a total of 10 videos. So this was only number 2. Yeah. So I have 8 more to go. But I'm definitely thinking about how to reconstruct it so that it is different for me to intentionally think about what I'm doing, because sometimes I don't. I just do and it happens and it works out. If it doesn't, okay, I won't do it again. Yeah. So for the upcoming standards for 2, what do you want to point out or touch on, or what do you suggest?
I have a feeling that I know differentiated instruction, I feel like you'll be great on. Students with learning differences or needs, you have ELL students in your population. So I feel like that goes hand in hand with differentiated instruction. and multiple perspectives. Not just your perspective as the teacher, but how can you pull in the children's perspective, their diverse backgrounds. I know you have, I want to say, a Spanish community, a strong Spanish community. How can you pull in their cultural backgrounds into the lesson? As well as, you know, the other students, the African-American students, as well as the Caucasian students. How can you pull all of their different backgrounds into the lesson?
I don't have any Caucasian students.
Oh, okay.
I don't have any of those.
All right.
Actually, I think we have one or two in our whole school.
Okay, got you. Well,
I will say, for this lesson, I gave word problems and we did a gallery walk.
Okay.
That was intentional.
Okay.
The example for the gallery walk, students. So all the students' names are incorporated in there. I did have a question where two students, their family, they're big on helping their family make meals. So the statement was about them making tacos as a family and selling them. So one family sold their tacos at one rate, another family sold theirs at another rate.
Gotcha.
Who charges more money? And we talked about things of that nature, made it relate to the lesson we have been doing, which is graphing, y equals mx plus b, things like that. Okay. So, and the other student, he loves video games, so I used his name and created a story about he wanted to buy a video game but had to save money.
Perfect.
This is what he started with. This is what he's going to do every week, and so they did talk about that a bit.
Question with that: are you
yes.
so they're going to answer their own problems that are related to them, correct? Like, yes. Okay.
During the gallery walk.
Are you also going to have a chance for students to answer each other's problems?
It's actually a gallery walk. So this time it's the whole cohort walking and talking together. Okay. And it's more of I'm explaining discourse, but they're doing the communications with one another. It was our first time doing a gallery walk. Is your baby trying to talk to you?
She is. She is. She done popped up. Go ahead.
It was this one was more of a group effort where everyone did the gallery walk together.
What I would add to that, because when I look at the next week's learning objective, learning differences, a lot of these are very intertwined with one another, right? So differentiated instruction, student with learning differences and needs, and then you have the ELL component within here, right? When I think about this particular standard, like I said, all three of those, like if you hit one number in one, you're probably going to get the same in the other ones. Okay. So you must craft some type of inquiry questions that help guide their gallery walk. So though they're walking through the gallery, they're looking at the rates and things of that nature. And I think I put some of those questions inside of your first one. But give them a chance to try to talk about how they would solve, the problem, or what is their thinking around not just the answer, but how could they go about it differently, to solve that. Give them a chance to have that collaborative learning ecosystem kind of experience. And I think that would also kind of hit on those other points like valuing students and also hitting those multiple perspectives.
Well, I will say the one thing that I noticed on the video I had, when I was editing, somehow it ended up gone. So I clicked it away some kind of way, but I'm gonna have to redo the whole video with the editing piece again because my ELL student took a piece of what we learned from the previous lesson from the first video about gauging X and Y and showing that it's constant. And he made that connection to a table in this video.
Oh, nice.
What you're talking about.
Okay.
So he does show another way, because he asks, aren't we able to do this and this and this to show if it's proportional like we learned last time? I said, you're exactly correct. And I highlighted the fact that he brought that in on his own.
Okay,
without
perfect.
having to be asked. So it's like he took that development and saw it and was like, oh, and he brought it back to everyone's attention. And I'm like, yeah, you're right. Remember when we did it? So I'm going to have to make sure that's specifically in there, because that's a piece I did edit out on accident.
Okay.
So I'm going to fix that and add that back.
One last question, or going back to the eval, collaboration with families and others. What were your thoughts on that?
I agree. The collaborative piece at the last minute was one of my students was able to do it, and I just asked them to create something that was proportional, or excuse me, that would be linear if you graphed it, and do something with family. So she engaged with her younger sister, which I thought was really interesting, because I know a lot of times when we say family, we just think of parents, but it was a chance for her to do something with her younger sister that her younger sister could help and relate to.
Right.
It made it an advanced topic for her, but as a little kid, she still understood.
Yeah.
That she had one plate, she had 2 pieces of fruit, and her little sister actually did that herself.
Oh, nice.
Showed her what to do, and it gave them a chance to play, and her to learn a lesson. And the sister was like getting mad, because she's like, no, just put the plate here. It doesn't matter what color. It's just like, no, I don't want that color there. Like, she really took to the activity and then took the picture. So I thought it was kind of neat how, when she explained it to me what occurred, I thought it was kind of neat that she was able to take her math and help her younger sister, because a lot of times kids don't see how, oh, I can't help you because I don't know that, or it's different. Or I can't help you to understand what I know.
Yeah.
But I think she was able to get her sister to understand the 8th grade concept, and she was in kindergarten.
Yeah. Okay, great. Okay. I thought it was kind of cool too. I was excited, right? And then when I look back at the rubric, I was like, oh.
It's okay. Well, I will say, I had another student that tried to do it, and he made a word problem that he took 4 bottles of water to practice, and then he only drank 1 bottle, but he was the only one in the picture. I'm like, why didn't you have your sibling to hold the water bottle or something like that? And so he was like, oh. I'm like, yeah, the whole point is to see you interacting with family,
right?
What we're doing at home as well as in class. He was like, oh, I didn't get it like that. I explained it thoroughly, but okay. But yeah, so I think the collaboration with family piece is supposed to be more of what I did versus the student doing. But I think the student interacting was important, and it did bring about something new.
I agree.
So I think it gave some emotional growth and development for the student to be able to socialize with her sibling on a level that was related to her, and not the other way around, because she's younger.
Yeah. And but, I would even add and say real world application, who would have thought, fruit in plates could have given her that mindset that, hey, what I'm learning as far as linear equations and graphing could go to that. So I agree. And when I went back and read because I'm telling myself, I said, oh, this is awesome. She got a little picture here and everything. But then looking back at the rubric, it's like, oh, it's what did Keisha do to explain, the growth and social emotional development of the student. And I know as a teacher, we give out progress reports or student support plans and things of that nature to kind of just keep the parent on track and things of that nature. So I guess just going back in that student discourse piece, or looking at the next steps that I kind of put in there, is thinking of a collaborative learning ecosystem, right? thinking about how we could have engaged parents in the conversation of where they are with this piece.
Mm-hmm.
I think it would have been a great homework assignment, and maybe having, instead of the little sister, maybe there's another piece to it where maybe the student has to have a data conversation with their parent,
Mm-hmm.
based off of their current grades, and using that actual lesson to say, I'm on trajectory of getting this grade, or I'm on, the slope is showing that I'm passing with this number, or I'm not. You know what I mean?
Right.
So I guess that's how that could have been extended in that way. But
of course.
yeah, but it sounds like are you comfortable with what you need to do for video 2?
Yeah, video 2 is done, but I think it does hit a lot of the markers. I don't think I have components missing like I did, as many missing, I guess I should say, as I did with the last one. What happened? But can you still see me? Okay.
Yeah.
I think it's running out. It gave me a little blurb about upgrading. So
Okay.
I think I'm
comfortable
with editing for this week's lessons. I should have it done today. That's my goal for today, is to get it done and posted. So I'll provide it to you so we can talk about it. But yeah, I feel like I'm gonna get more comfortable with them as they go along.
Mm-hmm.
It's just finding different ways of how to bring it in, because like this one, the next one for standard 3 was learning environment.
Yeah.
So I taught a lesson, but then I asked the kids, so how can we change our learning environment with art, because the lesson included art and math.
Okay.
So that's how I incorporated and changed it up to change how we it was more, I guess, because 3 is not more about a lesson, it's more about the students and the learning environment. So I did make sure that I made that applicable in the lesson. So I did include that piece. So yeah, I feel like as I read through them and look for what it is I'm supposed to be addressing, it'll become easier as I go along.
Okay.
But it looks like you're needed. So
yes.
I enjoyed our conversation, and I'll talk with you next weekend.
All right, dear. Talk to you soon.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.